welcome and have a good time.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me? All right. My name is Ben Butz, and I'm going to be sharing with you my experience in moving my incident response process from a security operations center to a CSIRT. Before we get started, do we have any blue teamers in here? Any response people? Oh, wow. Good portion. More than I was expecting. All right, so a little bit about myself. I've got about 13 years in information technology, with about 8 of those in information security, with the last 6 years being dedicated to incident response. I got my start in the United States Army. After the Army, I moved on to a company called Alliant Tech Systems. If you haven't heard of them, they make space systems, advanced weapon systems, basically things that give our military a competitive advantage. And now I'm with Target's cybersecurity incident response team as an incident handler. So I've had the pleasure of being part of the foundation of 2 incident response teams. So at ATK, we formed the Intelligence and Response Unit, and now at Target, I was there at the beginning of the cybersecurity incident response team. Right, so I put this talk together because I didn't see anybody really addressing the issue that there's a lack of incident response knowledge, skills, and abilities. So what I'd like for you to take away from this presentation is an urgency to overcome this skills gap. So if you're new in security, I'd encourage you to pursue a career in incident response. It's very rewarding, it's exciting, it's fun. If you're in a position to influence your company's security program, I'd encourage you to emphasize developing your incident response capabilities. And if you're in academia, anybody from the university here? A couple? All right. So I'd encourage you to teach this stuff. I don't see this as being taught. So this is particularly important. There are a couple of recent events here. You've got WannaCry and the NotPetya that have had global impacts. So they've affected organizations around the world. And there's a lot of focus on, well, they're not patching good enough. They're not, and that's true, right? But what I don't hear talked about is they're not responding to incidents correctly. Like, even if you've got a patch, I don't want to come off as don't patch, but you've got to be able to respond to your incidents. Right, so when I started at ATK, that was the beginning of my path in incident response. That was an interesting experience for me. I got a lot of experience quickly in dealing with very advanced actors and responding to those types of attacks. And that's when the word threat changed for me. So threat, before it was a virus, it was exploit, it was something created, tangible. At ATK, I realized threat meant the person on the other end of the keyboard controlling systems on my network, trying to accomplish a very real mission, right? And that threat could respond, it could change its tactics based on what I did. And that's when security really became cool for me. Right, and developing Target CSIRT. So it caught me off guard when staffing out our CSIRT. We have a 24-hour operation, very well staffed. While staffing that out, it caught me off guard that the lack of people applying for these positions that had incident response experience. So we hired a lot based on potential and motivation, willingness to learn, and we trained them up to get them up to speed. So apart from my personal observations, there are a couple of studies out there that support the idea that at least there's a perception of a skills gap. So the Center for Strategic and International Studies published a report, they called it Hacking the Skills Shortage, wherein 22% of respondents reported that they suffered reputational damage as a result of a shortage of cybersecurity skills. Over half of U.S. respondents reported that they outsource their cybersecurity services. So I'm not saying outsourcing is bad or you shouldn't do it. It's not good or bad, it just is. But what that tells me is companies don't feel like they're able to do it themselves. So they need to go outside and staff it elsewhere. SANS also publishes a report, the Incident Response Capability Survey, where 76% reported that They did have a dedicated IR team, but 65% reported that their IR team lacked skilled personnel. So the organization was there, but it wasn't staffed with skilled personnel. And one thing to call out from the slide, for the maturity of respondents' IR capabilities, that adds up to 75%, rated themselves as either immature or maturing. Right, so why do we have a shortage in IR skill sets? I think some of it's got to do with what we task our SOC to do, right? We've got them, our security folks are tasked with a lot of security engineering stuff, which is great. You need to do security engineering. But while your SOC is focused on doing these things, they're not focused on responding to incidents. So I think too often incident response is viewed as an additional duty and not a full-time job. Right? PCI, other compliance also complicate this. So here's what PCI says about incident response. Like, that's it. Like, be prepared to respond immediately to a system breach. Be available 24/7 to respond to alerts. Staff, provide appropriate training to your staff. Right? It's very, very high level, and if the people at the top don't understand incident response, how could they ever hope to do these correctly? Right, so an incident response plan is, if you just need to check a checkbox, that'll do it for you. But you need to have people that come in and day out and search for adversaries on your network. IR is not something you can do on the side. You might ask, well, if I don't have constant incidents, why do I need constant response capabilities? And so maybe you don't. But what you do have are constant attempts. You're constantly, somebody's trying to get in, phishing attempts, drive-by, web browsing. So while your incident responders are not responding to an actual incident, they need to be hunting. They need to be reviewing emails for malicious documents, analyzing links, detonating attachments to see what would happen if a user actually did that, and then take that information and look to see which users did it. You also need to be looking for signs of undetected compromise, so things like malicious C2 traffic, command and control traffic, looking for signs of persistence mechanisms. There's a whole host of hunting strategies out there, but basically they need to be looking for the presence of an attacker on your network. Right, so if you've got a SOC right now, if your organization has a SOC and it's compliance focused, you're probably spending a lot of time in the availability portion of the CIA triad, responding to outages, network outages, system outages, figuring out what change happened that made it, rolling it back, doing that kind of work. You're probably doing a lot of help desk stuff too, advanced help desk, right? If the network engineer can't figure out, why something's not working, suddenly somehow it becomes a security problem. Just send it to the SOC. They're there 24/7 anyway. They'll figure it out for me. But you got to get out of that business. All right, so if you were following PCI guidelines, some alerts you'd be interested in looking at look like this: multiple failed logons, successful logons. So this is kind of what I experienced when I arrived at Target in 2014. It was very compliance focused. And for a retail company, that's important. Compliance is important. You have to get your accreditation and everything. That's all well and good. But while we were doing this, it was bogging us down in non-adversarial activity. Right, so our top firing rules included, they had names like excessive successful attacks, access failure monitoring, right? And when these happen multiple times a day, the resolution is, hey, who made this change? Oh, that was me. Okay, well, it's business justified. Move on. Right, you're getting away from the important adversarial detection and response. All right, so what we have in place now, we stood up our Cyber Fusion Center in late 2014, and this is what our CSIRT looks like. So we're made up of 3 primary groups. The incident response team is 24/7. There are people right now reacting to detection alerts, doing hunting, looking for adversaries on the network. The threat intelligence team is determining which actors may have a significant impact to the organization, discovering what their TTPs and IOCs look like. They feed those over to the threat detection operations team, who builds detection for the incident response team. So one main thing that we did is we took our compliance monitoring, and we couldn't get rid of it. You can't just stop doing compliance monitoring. But we pared it down a lot. We took all of the rules, we looked at them, and we said, is this actually providing, is this meeting that compliance requirement? If not, get it out of there. We don't need that. But the ones that were providing compliance requirements, we offloaded this to a separate team. It's a completely different set of people doing compliance monitoring than doing incident response, so we could free up our incident responders to do the adversarial, in my view, the important response work. All right, so in staffing out our CSIRT, right, we look for a core set of skills for our analysts. So they've got to have fundamental IT skills. You know, they got to know the systems in the environment. They have to know how networking works, the basics. They need to know forensics. And I'm not talking about cop-style forensics. Get a disk image, you know, do the hash, do the change, you know, all through the line. We're not trying to prosecute anybody, right? Our mission is to stop them from accomplishing their mission on our network. So we do very fast, focused sniper forensics. We identify the artifacts on a system that are likely to contain the evidence that we need that would paint the picture of what happened. Right. They need to be familiar with enterprise logging, the logs that we have available, what they mean, how to get useful information out of it, how to search it effectively and at scale. And they need to be familiar with network forensics. So we use BroIDS. It's phenomenal. I love it. We've got a very large sensor deployment. So it basically takes your network traffic and turns it into logs. And then you feed that into a SIM or something else to search on. It's fantastic. You can build reporting out of it, reporting, alerting, searching. Anyway, your analysts need to be familiar with network forensics. They need to know how to capture packets and how to analyze packets, differentiate normal traffic from abnormal traffic. They also need to be effective communicators. They need, right, we're 24/7, so somebody who's working on a case needs to be able to hand off the case to the next shift if it crosses shifts. It needs to be effectively communicated, keeping great case notes. And they also need to be able to handle high-pressure situations. It can be very stressful when something big happens, when something important happens. You typically get senior management who at least want to know an update, you know, every so often, which completely understandable, but it adds to the stress level. You're trying to figure out what's happening. You got to deliver, you know, what you think you know, what you found out you thought you knew no longer is the case. You got to keep. They need to be able to handle high pressure situations. All right, so I'm going to walk you through a scenario, an incident response scenario, and when I do this, try to envision this in your organization. If you have an incident response team now, kind of compare it against your processes and how you see things playing out. Right, so we start with intelligence, our CTI team. So in this scenario, they're monitoring an advanced group that they suspect poses some kind of a significant threat to the organization. And they observe this group registering some infrastructure, in this case, domain names. So they send that over to our threat detection team, who builds the detection for it. And before you know it, we're getting alerts for traffic to these domains, to one of these domains. So the CSIRT sweeps, they investigate the network traffic. They find all the hosts that have been communicating to it. They see that it started about a week ago. They've got a timeline to start with. And they start triaging systems. So while conducting system triage, they discovered that the traffic is being generated by a malicious process. That process is, so it's making the communication, but that process, there's a TTP in there where that process is maintaining persistence on the system. So when you shut off the computer, it turns back on, it's still running for them. So that's what we call a tactic, technique, and procedure. That's what the adversary uses as a method. So it's not a MD hash of that file, that virus. I don't like to use that word, but you know what I mean. So we have a tactic, technique, and procedure to search on. So we scope out the environment. We look and we find additional hosts that have the same persistence method with different malicious processes. And those different malicious processes are communicating to different command and control infrastructure. Right, so now we've gained information. We know about more affected systems, more of the C2 infrastructure that we previously didn't know. Right, and so investigating these systems, we see one of them, Mimicaps was run. It dumped credentials, and we can see that one of the accounts started being used on other systems. So now our CSIRT has identified systems that the attacker has accessed, has touched, logged in and manipulated without the use of malware. Right, they just logged right into them. All right, so after all the identifying all the systems with the C2 traffic, all the systems logged into with the dumped passwords, they think they have a good list of systems in scope for this incident, and they implement a host-based isolation, effectively shutting down all network traffic to or from those hosts, except for traffic that would allow the analysts to continue investigating. They also implement a DNS sinkhole to the domains that we know about. And so that way any traffic from hosts that haven't been isolated will resolve to a system that we control. We can alert on it, monitor it, or even manipulate how the server would respond to those traffic calls. All right, so once we have all the systems isolated and contained, we can start digging into the systems individually, try to develop a timeline of activities, what happened on the systems, and trace it back to a root cause. So in this case, we were able to identify that it was traced back to a phishing email where an engineer was tricked into installing a malicious flash update. Right, so in your organizations, if this sounds similar to your processes and procedures for responding to an adversarial-based incident response, good on you. You're doing a great job. If it's not, right, you got to make some changes, because that's how you do incident response. And how do you get there? So branding, I mean, what's in a name? A lot of things are. It is just a name, so if you continue calling your organization a SOC, Security Operations Center, that's got a connotation with it. That's got, the network people say, oh, I can't figure it out, send it to the SOC. It helps to change the name. So at ATK, we had the Incident Response Unit, Intelligence and Response Unit. We had at Target, it's the Cybersecurity Incident Response Team. It's useful in differentiating the change in the organization. But more importantly, you need to allow your incident response, incident response to be a career path. It takes a lot of personal commitment to learn these skills, learn how to do incident response. And so you need to make it worthwhile for someone to do that. They need to have the next step and 2 steps higher than that. They need to be able to advance in the career doing incident response. Right, and you need to invest in your people. They need training. So there's no bachelor's program out there called Bachelor of Science, Cybersecurity Incident Response. Right? If there is, I haven't found it. But it's just not a thing. Even if it was a 4-year, well-rounded degree, it doesn't have time to teach these different things. It's not, you can't come out of college with incident response people at the bachelor level. Master's programs, I'm seeing a lot of policy programs, risk management programs. I've seen cloud security, network defense. Those are all great emphasis, but they're not incident response. I'm not seeing incident response in those offerings. And lastly, you've got to get your people out to conferences like BSides Las Vegas. If you can't get everybody out to Las Vegas once a year, get them to attend the local security conferences, local information security meetups. There are local hacker community events, capture the flag events. And if there isn't anything local, maybe start something. But basically, you have to get your people out there communicating with their peers, communicating with subject matter experts and networking, because this is changing all the time. All right, so I just want to emphasize before the end of it here, you're not doing incident, if you're not doing incident response correctly, do it. If you're interested in a career in incident response, reach out to me on LinkedIn, on Twitter. If you want to find out more about this or just have questions or anything, reach out to me. I'm more than willing to discuss. All right, well, that's all I had. Do you have any questions? Yes.
Hi. 2 questions, if that's okay. Out of the 3 teams, you mentioned a detection team being a 24-hour operation. Would you recommend, or do the other 2 teams also operate on a 24-hour operation?
So the way we have it is they're reachable 24/7. They don't all need to be. They're not there all the time, staffed 24/7. But if our night shift needs to reach out and say, hey, we need detection on this thing now, they can get a hold of the right people and make that happen.
Right, thank you. Second question. On your case study, you mentioned looking for process and services on other hosts.
Oh, sure.
You mentioned Bro as tooling, but do you have any tooling for host-based indicators that you might recommend?
So we build our own. There are free tools out there. So if you're looking for processes, there's the Procmon. I don't know why I'm brain blocking right now, but there are, Nearsoft has some great free tools to use. Task list, schedule tasks.
You mentioned, of course, most places compliance is important to most people, but as far as focusing on that actual skill set or certain training, is there anything that you could recommend where people start? Like some people are just looking for a really good starting point to see where they can move forward to actually go on the right path versus the compliance and policy.
Sure. I've attended SANS training. SANS is expensive. It's hard to do. I've been to Carnegie Mellon's Software Engineering Institute. They had a great program. I would recommend some of those. I don't know why I'm brain farting, but research it. They're out there. Some Google searching can find them. Yeah.
You want to talk about the level of automation, the level of automation that helps you put those 3 teams together?
Sure. So we're trying to build our own as much as possible. It's pricing, licensing. It's got to do with if we have an issue, if we reach out to a vendor to change that issue, that vendor's got other customers with competing priorities, whereas we can just make our changes. But yeah, automation. So we have an automated process for collecting evidence off of a system. And I don't mean to give plug outs to any of the vendors. I don't work for them or anything, but we do use Tanium. It deploys our custom built IR package, brings the stuff back. It also does our host-based isolation. Tanium doesn't. Tanium claims that they offer something similar. We have built our own and use Tanium to get it there.
Thank you all for joining us today. We are ending now for everybody going off to lunch. So thank you all for your time, and